My name is Alara Vance, and I was born a ghost. Not the kind that rattles chains or haunts attics, but the kind that exists only to serve the living. In my family, the living consisted of my parents, Susan and Robert, and most importantly, my younger brother Leo, the sun around which our dreary little solar system revolved. I was merely Pluto, cold, distant, and easily forgotten until I was needed to keep the orbit stable. Our family home, a once proud colonial in a suburb that had seen better days, was more of a museum of my sacrifices than a place of comfort. The scuff marks on the hardwood floors in the hall, that was from me hauling furniture by myself when Leo decided he was rebranding his bedroom for the 5th time. The faint water stain on the ceiling of the dining room, a reminder of the weekend I spent learning how to patch a leaky pipe from YouTube tutorials, because calling a plumber was an unnecessary expense. Yet financing Leo's 6-month sabbatical to find his inner artist in a dingy city apartment was a vital investment in his future. The most significant sacrifice, however, was one they never even knew about. It happened when I was 23. I had just landed my first real job as a junior architect, clutching my meager salary like a lifeline. I'd had a dream of saving for a down payment on a small condo in the city, a place that was mine, a place where the air wasn't thick with disappointment and obligation. That dream was obliterated by a single, tear-filled phone call from my mother. My father, in a spectacular display of poor judgment at a friendly poker game, had used the house as collateral and lost. The bank was coming. Foreclosure wasn't a threat, it was a date on a calendar, circled in red. My mother cried about the humiliation. My father drank in silence. Leo locked himself in his room with headphones on, unable to handle the negative energy. And I, the ghost, went to work. I cashed out the tiny 401k I had just started. I sold my reliable little car. I took out a high-interest personal loan that made my stomach churn every time I thought about it. I worked 70-hour weeks, my eyes burning from staring at blueprints, fueled by cheap coffee and pure, unadulterated panic. I didn't just pay off the debt, I found a loophole, a legal avenue to buy the house outright from the bank in a short sale before it went to auction. To protect myself, to create a firewall against future disasters, I did it through a shell corporation I created online for a few $100s. Vance Property Holdings, LLC. I went home, exhausted to the bone, and told them I had found an angel investor who had bought the property and was willing to rent it back to them. I drafted a formal lease. For 5 years, they paid rent to a P.O. box I'd set up, complaining about their cold corporate landlord, never knowing the checks were being deposited by their daughter into a high-yield savings account they would never touch. That account was my real dream now. It was my escape pod. The only person who knew the truth was Liam. We met a year after the house incident, at a charity gala I'd been dragged to by my boss. He was a lawyer, calm and perceptive, with eyes that seemed to see right through the cheerful, capable facade I presented to the world. On our 3rd date, after a few glasses of wine, the whole story tumbled out of me. He didn't look at me with pity, he looked at me with a slow-burning anger on my behalf. "They're not your family, Alara," he had said, taking my hand across the table. "They're your dependents. There's a difference." He was the first person to ever give my feelings a name, and I loved him for it. With him, I wasn't a ghost. I was solid. I was real. Our engagement was my first truly selfish act. I picked the ring, I chose the venue, a stunningly beautiful botanical garden conservatory. I meticulously budgeted and saved, using my own salary, determined that this one thing would be mine, untainted by their need. The date was set for October 12th. It was my anchor, the day my new life would officially begin. Then, one Sunday in May, the storm that had been gathering for my entire life finally broke. We were at the house for our obligatory weekly dinner. Leo, who had recently declared himself a brand strategist despite having no clients, tapped his fork against his water glass to get our attention. Beside him, his new fiancée, Tiffany, a woman whose vocabulary seemed to be 50% brand names and 50% vocal fry, beamed. "So, Tiff and I have some major news," Leo announced, puffing out his chest. "We've set a date for the wedding, and we're going big." My mother clasped her hands together in delight. "Oh, sweetie, that's wonderful. Where?" Tiffany spoke up, her voice dripping with condescension. "Well, my family has a tradition of European weddings. We've decided on a full week-long celebration at a private villa in Tuscany. It's going to be an absolute fairy tale." I felt a familiar cold dread creep up my spine. I knew my brother's financial situation, which was to say, he didn't have one. He lived off an allowance my parents gave him, funded almost entirely by the money I gave them for household expenses. My father, ever the enabler, clapped Leo on the back. "A wedding fit for a prince. We'll make it happen, son. Whatever it takes." His eyes and my mother's flickered towards me. It was a look I knew well. It was the look of a butcher sizing up a prize pig. I wasn't their daughter in that moment. I was the solution. I was the walking, talking bank account that was about to be emptied to fund a fairy tale I was not the princess of. And in the corner of my eye, I saw Liam's jaw tighten. He knew exactly what was coming. I gripped my wine glass, my knuckles turning white. The conservatory of the botanical garden, with its fragrant blossoms and sparkling glass ceiling, felt a million miles away. In its place, I could already see a Tuscan villa, paid for with the last remnants of my own dream. "Tuscany sounds incredible," I said, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "How exciting for you both. I assume you've been saving for a while, Leo?" The question was a delicate jab, but Leo was too self-absorbed to notice the point. "Saving is so middle class," he scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "It's about leveraging assets, Alara. Dad gets it." My father, Robert, puffed up with pride at being included in Leo's delusion of grandeur. "That's right. This isn't just a wedding. It's a networking opportunity. Tiffany's father is a big deal in import-export. An event like this, it's an investment in your brother's future." "An investment?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I had invested. I had invested my youth, my peace of mind, and my financial security into propping up this family. And my dividend was apparently the honor of bankrolling a lavish European party for them. My mother, Susan, finally made her move. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her touch was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a shackle. "Elara, honey, we know your wedding is coming up, and we are so happy for you. But it's simpler, isn't it? Local. Just one day. Liam's family is comfortable, and you have that wonderful job." Every word was a carefully chosen tool, designed to minimize my celebration and maximize my obligation, my simple local wedding. As if the years of saving and dreaming I had poured into it were nothing more than a casual garden party. "Our wedding is exactly what Liam and I want," I said, my voice dangerously steady. I gently pulled my hand from under hers. "And we are paying for it ourselves." "Of course, dear," she said, her smile never faltering. "But that's exactly the point. You're so capable, so responsible. Leo, he's a dreamer. He needs a little more help to get his wings off the ground. We were thinking, if you could just postpone your little event for a year or so, it would free up so much capital, the family's capital." The audacity of it stole my breath. It wasn't a request. It was a foregone conclusion in their minds. I was being asked to dismantle my future to assemble my brothers. Liam, who had remained silent until now, placed his fork down with a quiet, deliberate click. The sound cut through the tension like a gunshot. "I'm sorry, Susan. I think I misheard you," he said, his tone polite but edged with steel. "Did you just refer to our wedding as a little event and suggest Alara postpone her marriage to me to help pay for your son's destination party?" My mother's face tightened. She had always been intimidated by Liam's calm, unflappable demeanor. Well, when you put it so bluntly, Liam, I just mean that we have to be practical. Leo's opportunity is now. And Alara's isn't? Liam pressed, his eyes fixed on her. Her happiness doesn't have a deadline? This is a family discussion, Liam, my father grumbled, clearly uncomfortable being challenged. I'm about to marry into this family, Robert, Liam countered smoothly. Ilara's happiness is my primary concern. So I'll ask again. Are you asking your daughter to sacrifice her wedding for her brother's? The air crackled. Leo, for the first time, looked uneasy. He wasn't used to direct conflict he couldn't charm his way out of. Tiffany was inspecting her diamond engagement ring as if it held the secrets to the universe, completely disengaged. I finally found my voice, a cold fury washing over me and extinguishing the hurt. No one is postponing anything. Liam and I are getting married on October 12th. Leo, if you and Tiffany want a Tuscan wedding, I sincerely hope you find a way to pay for it. Perhaps your brand strategist skills could be used to secure some sponsors. The sarcasm was lost on him. He just looked wounded. Why are you being like this, Alara? This is supposed to be a happy time. You're ruining the vibe. I'm not the one trying to hijack a wedding, Leo. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I think this dinner is over. Elara, I am very disappointed in your selfishness. We raised you to be a part of a family, not some independent contractor. You need to think long and hard about your priorities. They left the table, a united front of indignation. Liam and I sat alone in the suddenly quiet dining room. The half-eaten meal grew cold on our plates. You know this is just the beginning, right? Liam said softly, reaching for my hand. I know, I whispered, my throat tight. I felt a sense of dread, a premonition that they wouldn't just accept my nai. They had never accepted it before. Why would this time be any different? They saw my boundaries not as lines to be respected, but as walls to be bulldozed. And they were about to bring out the heavy machinery. The days following that disastrous Sunday dinner descended into a cold war, waged through the insidious channels of familial psychological warfare. My mother initiated the first campaign, Operation Guilt. My phone became a minefield of passive-aggressive text messages. Your father's blood pressure is worryingly high. He's so stressed about all this ugliness. A picture of my father looking forlornly out the window would follow. Then came the voicemails, delivered in her signature martyred tone. I just don't know where I went wrong as a mother. I tried to raise my children to love and support each other. I suppose I failed. Don't bother calling back, dear. I need to go lie down. I forwarded every message to Liam, who responded with a series of skull emojis and the simple text. Stay strong. Do not engage. His support was the only thing keeping me anchored. Next, my father attempted a different tactic, the appeal to logic. A logic so warped it could only make sense within the bubble of our family's dysfunction. He cornered me one afternoon when I stopped by to drop off some mail that had been mistakenly delivered to my apartment. He had a spreadsheet open on his laptop, a chaotic jumble of numbers and poorly formatted cells. Ilara, look, he said, gesturing to the screen with a paternalistic air, as if explaining a complex theory to a simple-minded child. I've run the numbers. Your wedding with the garden and the caterer, it's a sunk cost, a one-day event, an emotional expenditure. Leo's wedding, on the other hand, look at this guest list. He pointed to a list of names, most of whom I didn't recognize. This is Tiffany's side. These are people with influence, with capital. For Leo to spend a week with them in a relaxed, celebratory environment, the return on investment could be exponential. It could set him up for life. Don't you see? Your wedding is a memory. His is a strategy. I stared at him, my mind reeling. He had literally created a cost-benefit analysis of his children's happiness and found mine wanting. He was pitching me on the financial upside of canceling my own marriage celebration. "Dad," I began, my voice trembling with a rage I was struggling to contain. "This isn't a business merger. This is my wedding. It's the day I commit my life to the man I love. You cannot put a price on that. You cannot calculate the ROI on my soul." "Don't be so dramatic, Alara," he sighed, closing the laptop with a snap of finality. "It's just a party. You and Liam can go down to the courthouse. It's the marriage that matters, not the wedding. Your brother needs this." Your brother needs this. It was the family motto, the justification for every sacrifice, the answer to every question. It was the eraser that wiped my needs off the board. I walked out of the house without another word, the sound of his disappointed sigh following me like a shadow. Leo's approach was, predictably, the most direct and least imaginative. He alternated between pleading and insulting. One day, he'd text me a photo from our childhood, the two of us on a swing set. "Remember when we were a team? I miss that." The next, after I failed to respond, the message would be venomous. "You're just jealous. You've always been jealous of me and Tiff. You can't stand to see me happy. You're a bitter, selfish shrew, and Liam will figure it out eventually." I blocked his number. The final and most desperate assault came from Tiffany. She requested to meet me for coffee at a chic downtown cafe. I agreed, against Liam's advice, because a small, foolish part of me hoped I could appeal to her as another woman planning a wedding. I thought perhaps she didn't understand the full context of what her future in-laws were asking of me. I was wrong. She arrived 20 minutes late, air-kissed me on both cheeks, and launched into a monologue about the stresses of coordinating with a Tuscan wedding planner. "It's a logistical nightmare, Ilara, honestly," she said, sipping her oat milk latte. "The time difference is just brutal, and finding a DJ who understands our specific vibe, it's a full-time job." "I can imagine," I said neutrally. "So," she said, finally getting to the point, "Leo told me you were being a little difficult about the funding. I get it. You're worried about your own thing, but you have to see the bigger picture. This wedding isn't just for us. It's for the Vance family brand." "The Vance family brand?" I asked, utterly baffled. "What brand is that?" "Legacy, class, success," she said, as if it were obvious. "My parents are very image conscious. They need to see that Leo comes from a family that can match their energy. A small local wedding for the older sister, followed by a lavish Tuscan extravaganza for the son. It sends a powerful message. It shows where the family's priorities are. It shows who the heir is." There it was, laid bare in the most transactional, brutal terms imaginable. I wasn't just the backup plan. I was the deliberate, public-facing sacrifice. My simple wedding was necessary to make his extravagant one seem even more impressive by comparison. My purpose was to be the drab, gray backdrop against which he could shine. "So, to be clear," I said, my voice dangerously low, "you want me to voluntarily downgrade my own wedding, my own public declaration of love and commitment, so that you and Leo can look more important to your parents?" She had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I wouldn't say downgrade. I would say re-strategize. It's just smart branding." I stood up, leaving my untouched coffee on the table. "Thank you for the coffee, Tiffany, and for the clarity. You have my answer. It's no. Enjoy your wedding. I hear GoFundMe is a great tool for dreamers." I walked out of the cafe, my heart pounding. The last thread of hope that this could be resolved, that they could see reason, had been severed. They weren't just misguided, they were ruthless. They had declared war on my happiness, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that they had not yet fired their biggest cannon. I just had no idea how destructive it would be. The quiet that followed my meeting with Tiffany was more unnerving than the previous weeks of emotional bombardment. My phone fell silent. My parents didn't answer when I called to check on a minor household issue I was technically still responsible for. Leo and Tiffany's social media, usually a nonstop deluge of pre-wedding bliss, went dark. It was a silence that felt heavy and calculated, like the eerie calm before a tornado. "They're plotting," Liam said one evening as we sat on my apartment balcony. He was right. My family wasn't capable of graceful concession. A retreat meant they were regrouping to find a new line of attack. "What else can they do?" I murmured, more to myself than to him. "They've tried guilt, manipulation, and a business proposal from hell. I've said no to everything. There's nothing left for them to take." "Don't underestimate the creativity of the desperate," Liam warned. His words proved prophetic. The attack came a week later, and it was a masterpiece of strategic cruelty, aimed not at me, but at the very foundation of my dream. The phone call came from a number I didn't recognize. I was at my desk, trying to finalize a complex structural analysis for a new skyscraper project. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Is this Alara Vance?" a polite professional voice asked. "Speaking," I said, distracted, my eyes still on the screen. "This is Catherine from the Edgewood Botanical Conservatory. I'm calling regarding your event booking for October 12th. We just received your cancellation confirmation via email, and I'm processing the refund of your deposit. I just wanted to verify the mailing address for the check." The world stopped. The blueprints on my screen blurred into meaningless lines. My breath caught in my chest, a sharp, painful gasp. "I'm sorry," I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Cancellation? I didn't cancel my wedding." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," Catherine said, her professional tone now laced with confusion. "That's odd. The email came from the address we have on file for you. It was very specific. It cited unforeseen family circumstances and invoked the emergency cancellation clause. Your mother, Susan Vance, also called this morning to follow up and ensure we were expediting the refund." My mother. Of course. A white-hot rage, pure and absolute, surged through me, burning away the shock and leaving behind a terrifying clarity. They hadn't just asked. They hadn't just demanded. They had gone behind my back, impersonated me, and tried to surgically remove my wedding from existence. They had taken the keys to my dream and driven it off a cliff. Also, they could collect the insurance money for their own joyride. "Catherine," I said, my voice eerily calm, the fury having frozen into something hard and sharp. "I did not send that email. My wedding is not canceled. This is a fraudulent act. Do not, under any circumstances, process that refund. I am on my way to you right now with my fiancé, who is also my legal counsel." "Of course, Ms. Vance. We won't do anything. We'll see you soon." I hung up the phone. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at my computer screen. The skyscraper I was designing seemed to mock me, a symbol of strength and stability, while my own world had just been leveled. I called Liam. I didn't cry. My voice didn't even shake. I relayed the facts of the situation with the detached precision of an architect describing a structural failure. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just said, "I'm leaving the office now. I'll meet you in the lobby of your building in 15 minutes. Don't talk to any of them. Don't answer your phone. We're going to the conservatory first, then we're going to war." The drive to the botanical gardens was silent. The rage inside me had solidified into a heavy, cold resolve. This was no longer about a wedding. This was about my life. It was about my right to exist outside of their needs. For my entire life, they had treated me like a utility, a resource to be tapped. Now, they had treated me like an identity to be stolen. They had erased me. Catherine at the conservatory was horrified and deeply apologetic. She showed us the email, a sickeningly plausible forgery that used phrases I often used and referenced details of our planning. She also had a record of the call from my mother, who had apparently put on a convincing performance as a heartbroken mother, forced to cancel her daughter's dream wedding due to a tragic, unspecified family emergency. Liam handled it with terrifying efficiency. He got a sworn affidavit from Catherine detailing the call. He had her print and certify the fraudulent email. He confirmed that our booking was secure and that they would add a password protocol to our account for any future changes. As we walked out of the conservatory, the beautiful glass structure gleaming in the afternoon sun, the last of my hesitation vanished. The part of me that still flinched at the thought of hurting them, the part that still craved their approval, died in that office. They had used my love and sense of duty as a weapon against me one too many times. "You have a document, don't you?" Liam asked as we got back in the car. He wasn't talking about the affidavit. He was talking about the ace I had been holding up my sleeve for 5 years. "The deed to the house," I said, "and the lease agreement they signed," he added, "in my safe deposit box." "Good," he said, starting the engine. "Tomorrow morning, we're going to the bank, then we're going to a legal stationer, and then tomorrow night, you're calling a family meeting. You're going to tell them you've reconsidered your position on the wedding finances." I looked at him, and for the first time that day, a slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Oh, they have no idea what's coming," I said. "The landlord is about to pay a visit." That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I lied to my mother with the same effortless ease she had always lied to me. I called her, my voice deliberately pitched to sound weary and defeated. "Mom," I said, letting out a long sigh. "You were right. Liam and I have been talking all day. This whole situation is tearing us apart. It's not worth it." I could almost hear the triumphant gleam in her voice. "Oh, honey," she cooed, the fake sympathy dripping from every syllable. "I knew you'd see reason. It's always best for the family to be united. I'm so proud of you for making the mature choice." "Can we all get together tomorrow night?" I asked. "For dinner at the house? I'd like to talk about the financial side of things, about how I can help with Leo's wedding." "Of course, darling. We'll be here. Robert will pick up a roast. We'll make it a celebration." A celebration. The word was a macabre joke. She thought she was celebrating a victory. She had no idea she was planning her own execution. After I hung up, Liam looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "That was frighteningly good," he said. "Are you sure you're not part spy?" "I learned from the best," I replied, a bitter taste in my mouth. The next 24 hours were a blur of methodical preparation. We went to the bank and retrieved the original deed to the house, the signed lease agreement, and 5 years' worth of cashed rent checks, each one bearing my mother's or father's signature. Then we went to a legal supply store, where Liam, with the grim satisfaction of a master craftsman, purchased a packet of official, try-copy, notice to vacate forms. That evening, as we drove towards my childhood home, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I felt like an architect reviewing the final plans for a demolition. The structure was rotten to its foundation, and it was time to bring it down. We walked in to find a scene of jubilant victory. My father was carving a roast chicken, whistling a cheerful tune. My mother was setting the table with the good china, the plates reserved for holidays and special occasions. Leo and Tiffany were sitting on the couch, heads together, scrolling through a website for Tuscan honeymoon packages on a laptop. They all looked up as we entered, their faces wreathed in smug, self-satisfied smiles. "There they are," my father boomed. Come in, come in. We're so glad you came to your senses, Alara. Water under the bridge, eh?" "Something like that," I said, placing my large leather portfolio on the dining room table. We sat down to dinner, and I played my part. I let them guide the conversation. They spoke of deposit transfers and flight bookings and floral arrangements for a wedding in a country thousands of miles away. They talked about it as if my own wedding, my own life, was a ghost that had already been exorcised from the room. I ate my chicken, drank my water, and listened. I let them fill the space with their greed and their entitlement, letting them build their own pyre higher and higher. Finally, when the plates were cleared and my mother was pouring coffee, my father leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach contentedly. "So, Alara, let's get down to brass tacks. How much of that venue deposit are we getting back? Tiffany's father is holding a villa for us, but we need to commit by the end of the week." I looked at Liam. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. Showtime. "Actually, the deposit is a non-issue," I said, my voice cutting through their cheerful chatter. The Edgewood Conservatory was very understanding when I explained the fraudulent cancellation attempt, My booking for October 12th is fully secure. The smiles around the table froze and then vanished. My mother's hand, holding the coffee pot, trembled slightly. What? What are you talking about? She stammered. Fraudulent? Impersonating someone in an email and then calling to confirm that impersonation in order to illegally access their financial assets, Liam interjected, his tone as cool and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. The legal term for that is wire fraud. It's a federal offense. We have a sworn statement from the venue's event coordinator, Catherine, a very nice woman. She was quite disturbed. My father's face went from ruddy to a pasty gray. Leo looked back and forth between my mother and me, his brain clearly struggling to process the shift in the room's atmosphere. But this isn't about that, I continued, reaching for my portfolio. I told you I wanted to discuss finances. And I do. I opened the portfolio and pulled out the first document, sliding it across the polished wood of the table to my father. It was the deed, the official notarized deed to the house at 128 Oakwood Lane, with the owner listed as Vance Property Holdings, LLC. I don't understand, he said, his voice barely a whisper. What is this? That, I said, is the title to my house, the one you're all sitting in. I then laid out the next document, the lease agreement they had signed 5 years ago, with its clauses about property maintenance and timely rent payments. And then came the finale. I fanned out the canceled checks, a colorful mosaic of their financial dependence on a landlord they never knew was me. For 5 years, I said, my voice ringing with a power I had never known I possessed. You have been living in my property. You haven't been building equity. You haven't been paying down a mortgage. You have been tenants. And I have to say, you have been terrible tenants. My mother finally found her voice, a high-pitched, incredulous shriek. You're lying. This is a sick, twisted joke. Robert, tell her she's lying. But my father was staring at his own signature on the lease, his face a mask of dawning horror. He knew it was real. So, about those finances, I said, pulling the final document from my portfolio. It was the notice to vacate form, filled out in Liam's perfect block lettering. I placed it gently on top of the pile of checks. According to Clause 7B of your lease, which you have violated numerous times, the landlord reserves the right to terminate the agreement with 30 days written notice. Consider this your notice. You have 1 month to vacate my property. The first of next month is your final day. Silence. A profound, echoing silence filled the room, broken only by the sound of Tiffany letting out a small, horrified gasp. Leo looked like he had been struck by lightning. My mother was staring at me, her mouth hanging open, her eyes filled not with sorrow or remorse, but with a look of pure, venomous rage. She was looking at the ghost who had finally decided to start haunting. The silence in the dining room stretched, taut and fragile, before my mother shattered it with a sound that was half gasp, half sob. No, she whispered, shaking her head in violent denial. No, you wouldn't. You can't. We're your family. The word family was her ultimate weapon. The trump card she had played my entire life to win every argument, justify every demand. But for the first time, it had no power over me. Family? I responded, my voice dangerously soft. Is that what you call what we are? A family doesn't impersonate their own daughter to try and steal from her. A family doesn't plot to destroy one child's happiness to fund another's fantasy. You stopped being my family and started being my tenants the moment you decided my life was a resource for you to liquidate. My father finally looked up from the documents, his face ashen, his eyes pleading. Elara, please, your mother. She didn't mean it. She was just desperate to give your brother the best. And what about me, Dad? I shot back, the question erupting from a place of hurt so deep it felt like it had been buried in my bones. When was it my turn for the best? Was it when I was 23, working 3 jobs to secretly save this house from your mistakes? Or was it every birthday and holiday for the last 5 years when you took the money I gave you, money I earned, and handed it over to him so he could continue to find himself? He flinched, having no answer. There was no answer. It was Tiffany who, surprisingly, broke the stalemate. Her fairy tale had just been torched, and her reaction was not one of sorrow, but of pure, pragmatic fury. She turned to Leo, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm. "Is this true?" she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "Is your entire family a fraud? Are you actually poor?" Leo, the golden child, the prince, looked utterly lost. He gaped at her, then at me, then at his parents, as if hoping one of them would rewrite the script. It's a misunderstanding, Tiff," he stammered. "Alara's just being dramatic. She'd never actually kick us out." "Oh, wouldn't I?" I said, standing up from the table. Liam rose with me, a silent, imposing presence at my side. "The sheriff will be here at 9 a.m. on the 1st of next month to escort any remaining persons and property from the premises. I would advise you to be packed and gone before then. It would be less embarrassing for you." My mother lunged to her feet, her chair clattering backwards onto the floor. Her face was a grotesque mask of rage. "You ungrateful little witch!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "After everything I've done for you, I gave you life." "Yes, you did," I said, my voice cold and even. "And for 28 years, I have been paying you back for it. The debt is now settled. My account is closed." Liam placed a gentle hand on my back, guiding me towards the door. We didn't look back. We walked out of the house, leaving the notice to vacate sitting in the center of the table like a tombstone. As we closed the front door behind us, the sound of my mother's screaming followed us out into the cool night air, but it was quickly joined by a new sound. Tiffany's, equally shrill, hurling accusations at Leo. The flawless, united front of the Vance family had finally, irrevocably, crumbled. The 30-day notice period was a masterclass in the 5 stages of grief, executed with all the grace of a runaway train. First came denial. For the first week, they acted as if nothing had happened. They didn't pack, they didn't call. I had security cameras installed around the exterior of the property, a precaution Liam insisted on, and I could see them coming and going as usual. They were operating under the delusion that if they ignored the problem, it would simply cease to exist. They believed I would blink first. They had always believed that, and I had always proven them right. This time would be different. Then came anger. When they realized I wasn't backing down, the flying monkeys were deployed. My Aunt Carol called, her voice thick with misplaced righteousness. "Alara, what in God's name are you doing to your mother? She called me in hysterics? Evicting your own parents? It's barbaric. It's unnatural." "What's unnatural, Aunt Carol?" I replied, my tone devoid of emotion. "Is a mother committing wire fraud against her own daughter. You should ask her about that next time she calls you in hysterics." The line went dead. Next came bargaining. My father appeared at my apartment building's call box one afternoon. He didn't sound angry, just exhausted and broken. "Elara, let's just talk. Name your price. What do you want? Do you want us to pay more rent? Do you want a formal apology from your mother?" "What I want, Dad," I said into the intercom, "is for you to vacate my property by the 1st of the month, as per the legal notice you were served. I'm not negotiating the terms of my own liberation." I buzzed him off. Then came depression. Through the cameras, I saw the first moving boxes appear on the porch. They were filled haphazardly, a testament to their disorganized panic. Leo's car, the one I had co-signed the loan for years ago, a mistake I was now paying off myself to protect my credit, disappeared from the driveway. A cousin, the only family member who had texted me a simple "Are you okay?" informed me that Tiffany had called off the engagement and moved back in with her parents. The Tuscan wedding was officially dead. The Vance family brand was in ruins. Finally, on the last day of the month, came a twisted, bitter form of acceptance. A large moving truck, far too small for 30 years of accumulated possessions, was parked in the driveway. A crew of 2 men were struggling to load the truck while my parents and Leo stood on the lawn, arguing over what to keep and what to leave behind. It was a pathetic, tragic scene, a tableau of their own making. The next morning, as promised, Liam and I arrived at the house at 8:45 a.m. The sheriff's deputy, a stoic man named Officer Miller, met us at the curb. The moving truck was gone, But my parents' and Leo's cars were still there. A mountain of trash bags and discarded furniture sat by the curb, a monument to their poor planning. "Are you anticipating any trouble, ma'am?" Officer Miller asked me. "I'm anticipating a great deal of drama, officer," I replied, "but I don't believe they'll be violent." At precisely 9 a.m., we walked up the path and I used my key to open my own front door. They were sitting on the floor in the empty living room, surrounded by a few remaining suitcases. They looked tired, defeated, and full of a simmering rage. My mother looked up at me, her eyes hollow. "I hope you're happy, Ilara," she whispered, her voice a venomous rasp. "You have your house, and you've lost your family." I looked around the empty room, at the bare walls and the dusty floors. I saw not an ending, but a beginning, a blank canvas. I looked at her, at the woman who had caused me so much pain, and I felt not hatred, not anger, but a profound and final sense of release. "You've got it wrong, Mom," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I haven't lost a family, I've just evicted my tenants." Watching them leave was like watching a slow-motion demolition. Every movement was laden with the weight of unspoken accusations and shattered history. Leo, his face pale and sullen, refused to look at me, hauling his suitcases out the door as if they were filled with lead. My father, a man I once idolized, seemed to have shrunk. He fumbled with his car keys, his hands trembling, his gaze fixed on the floorboards as if they held the answers he couldn't find in my eyes. My mother was the last to go. She paused at the doorway and turned, her expression a toxic cocktail of grief and fury. "One day, you'll be old and alone," she spat, her voice raspy with spent rage. "And you will remember this day. You'll remember how you threw away the only people in the world who would have ever truly loved you." "The only people who loved what I could do for them, you mean?" I corrected her, my voice unwavering. "There's a difference. Goodbye, Mom." I closed the door on her shocked face, the solid thud echoing through the empty house. I leaned against it, the cool wood a comfort against my back. Liam came and stood beside me, not speaking, just offering the silent support that had become my bedrock. We stood there for a long time, listening as the sounds of their car engines turning over, the slam of car doors, and finally the squeal of tires on asphalt faded into the distance, leaving behind a profound and cleansing silence. The house felt enormous, hollowed out. It was mine, but it was also a mausoleum of my former life. Every room held a memory, a ghost of a past sacrifice. The living room where I'd been told my college ambitions were cute but impractical. The kitchen where I'd cooked 1,000 meals they'd barely acknowledged. The small bedroom upstairs where I had spent countless nights crying into my pillow, wondering why I wasn't enough. "It doesn't feel like a home yet," I whispered to Liam. "It feels like a crime scene." "That's because it was," he said gently, taking my hand. "But we're not here to mourn. We're here to renovate." And renovate we did. It became our mission, our therapy. The first thing to go was the disgusting orange feature wall in the living room that Leo had declared was a bold statement piece. We took sledgehammers to it, the catharsis of shattering the plaster a balm to my soul. We ripped up the old stained carpets that smelled faintly of my father's cigars and my mother's disappointment. Beneath them, we found beautiful, original hardwood floors, hidden potential just waiting to be uncovered. It felt symbolic. We spent every weekend and most evenings at the house, covered in dust and paint. We weren't just changing the aesthetics, we were performing an exorcism. We painted the walls in light, airy colors, chasing out the shadows. We installed large new windows that flooded the rooms with sunlight. Liam, a surprisingly skilled carpenter, built custom bookshelves in what would become our shared office. I designed a new layout for the kitchen, tearing down a wall to create an open, welcoming space perfect for entertaining friends, our real family. Slowly, painfully, the ghosts began to fade. The house started to feel less like a monument to my past and more like a blueprint for my future. I heard snippets about my former family through the cousin who had become my reluctant informant. They had found a small, dreary apartment in a town 30 miles away, a place with thin walls and a view of a parking lot The sudden shock of living within their means was brutal. My father's rideshare income barely covered their inflated rent. Leo, stripped of his brand strategist title, was working at a big box electronics store, a name tag clipped to his polo shirt. My cousin said he was perpetually miserable, complaining to anyone who would listen about his fall from grace. My mother, stripped of her home and her status as matriarch, had apparently become a recluse. They never tried to contact me directly again. The silence was a gift. As October approached, the final pieces of our new life clicked into place. The house was transformed, a beautiful, light-filled space that reflected who Liam and I were as a couple. The wedding plans were complete, every detail a testament to our shared taste and mutual respect. A week before the wedding, Liam and I were sitting on our new back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was crisp with the scent of autumn. "Are you happy, Alara?" he asked, his voice soft. I considered the question. It wasn't a simple yes or no. The past year had been a crucible, forging me into someone new. I had lost the only family I had ever known, and there was a quiet, lingering grief for the parents and brother I wished they could have been. But I had also gained something infinitely more valuable, myself. I had found my voice, my boundaries, my strength. I was no longer a ghost, buffeted by the needs of others. I was solid, real, and standing in a home I had not just bought, but truly built. I said, leaning my head on his shoulder. I'm more than happy. I'm free. Our wedding day was everything I had ever dreamed of. And more. The conservatory was breathtaking, the glass ceiling showing a perfect, cloudless blue sky. I walked down the aisle on the arm of Liam's father, a kind, gentle man who had welcomed me into his family without reservation. Our friends surrounded us, their faces beaming. As I stood across from Liam, ready to say my vows, I saw a future stretching out before me, a future filled with light, partnership, and unconditional love. There were no shadows, no obligations, no ghosts. Later, during the reception, as the string quartet played and champagne flowed, Liam pulled me close on the dance floor. "You know," he whispered in my ear, "I was thinking, that savings account, the one with all the rent money in it, we never touched it." "I know," I said, smiling. "It's our emergency fund." "I think we should use a little of it," he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. I was looking at flights. There's this little private villa in Tuscany. It's supposed to be an absolute fairy tale. I threw my head back and laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy that echoed through the glass house. It was the sound of a woman who was finally, completely home. The honeymoon in Tuscany was a dream, not the networking event or brand strategy that Tiffany had envisioned. It was a quiet, beautiful, selfish stretch of days that belonged only to us. We rented a small stone villa on a hill overlooking acres of vineyards. We spent our days exploring ancient towns, indulging in 3-hour lunches, and drinking wine under a canopy of stars. For the first time in my life, I felt no obligation to anyone but myself and the man beside me. The weight I had carried for so long I hadn't even realized it was there was finally, truly gone. We returned to a Boston ablaze with peak autumn foliage and a newfound sense of peace. The house welcomed us, no longer a project or a battleground, but a genuine sanctuary. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My and Liam's careers were demanding, but we made time for each other. We hosted dinner parties with friends, landscaped the garden on weekends, and started planning for the future. Plans that included only the two of us. My former family remained a ghost on the periphery. I didn't seek out information, but occasionally, pieces of it would find me through my cousin. Leo had been fired from the electronics store for a negative attitude. He was now working a temp job at a warehouse, manual labor that I knew he must despise. My father had gotten into a minor car accident while driving for the rideshare service. And while he wasn't hurt, the car was out of commission, temporarily crippling their main source of income. My mother remained a specter of silence. Each piece of news brought a strange pang, not of guilt, but of a profound, detached sadness for the people who had chosen a path of self-immolation over one of change. They had been given so many chances to be a real family, They had chosen power and control, and now they were living with the consequences. And then, about 6 months after the wedding, a bomb detonated in our quiet life. It arrived in the form of a lawyer's letter. It wasn't addressed to me, but to Vance Property Holdings, LLC, at the P.O. box I still maintained. Liam brought it home from his office, his expression grim. "You might want to sit down for this," he said, handing me the thick, cream-colored envelope. My heart hammered as I tore it open. Inside was a dense stack of legal documents. The summary was simple. It was a lawsuit. My parents and Leo were suing me. They weren't suing over the eviction. Liam had ensured that process was ironclad. Instead, they had found a bottom-feeding property litigation lawyer, the kind of predator who takes on the most desperate of cases. Their claim was a masterwork of creative fiction. They alleged that I had defrauded them in the sale of the house. They claimed that, in their time of financial crisis, I had used my position of trust and their diminished mental state to coerce them into selling the house to my shell corporation for a fraction of its market value. They were accusing me of fiduciary misconduct and elder abuse. Furthermore, they claimed the rent money they had been paying for 5 years was not rent at all, but was, in fact, an informal series of mortgage payments to me, and that by evicting them, I had illegally foreclosed on their property and stolen their equity. They were demanding that the original sale be voided. They wanted the house back. And they wanted punitive damages for emotional distress. I stared at the pages, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. It was so absurd, so completely divorced from reality, that it was almost comical. "They can't be serious," I whispered, looking up at Liam. His face was grim. "Legally, their case is a house of cards. It's frivolous and built on lies. But Alara, that's not the point." He sat down across from me. "Lawsuits like this aren't designed to win. They're designed to bleed you dry. They know we have more resources than they do, but they're betting that the cost, financially and emotionally, of fighting them will be so high that you'll eventually settle. They don't want to win in court. They want to make your life a living hell until you give them what they want just to make it stop." He was right. This was their final, desperate act of war. It wasn't about the house anymore. It was about punishment. They couldn't stand to see me happy and thriving while they were miserable. If they couldn't have my resources, they would destroy them, even if it meant destroying themselves in the process. It was the ultimate act of spite. "So what do we do?" I asked, the initial shock already hardening back into that familiar, cold resolve. Liam's expression shifted. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. "They've made a grave error, Ilara," he said. "They've decided to fight you in my arena. They've brought a knife to a gunfight, and they have no idea that the person they're suing is engaged to the best damn corporate litigator in this city." He reached across the table and took my hand. "We don't settle, we don't negotiate, we countersue. We go for discovery. We depose them under oath. We don't just win, we obliterate them." The legal battle that ensued was a slow, grinding, and ugly process. It began with the discovery phase, where both sides are required to turn over all relevant documents. Their lawyer sent a request for every financial record I had going back 7 years. We complied, handing over pristine, organized records of the loan I took out, the sale documents from the bank, the articles of incorporation for the LLC, every last rent check. In return, we requested their financial records. What we received was a chaotic mess of credit card statements showing years of frivolous spending, bank records showing my household expense money being immediately transferred to Leo, and most damningly, a series of emails between my father and his poker buddies from the time of the crisis. In one email sent a week before I stepped in, my father wrote, "Lost it all. The house is gone. Susan's gonna kill me. Need a miracle." This single email completely dismantled their entire claim of being coerced or misled. It was proof that they knew the house was lost before I ever got involved. They hadn't been tricked into a sale, they had been rescued from a foreclosure. The next step was the depositions. This was the part I dreaded and Liam relished. They would be questioned, under oath and on camera, by Liam. One by one, They entered the sterile conference room at Liam's law firm. My father went first. He was a shadow of his former self, fidgety and nervous. Liam was mercilessly polite. He walked him through the events of the foreclosure, using the emails to refresh his memory. My father squirmed, contradicted himself, and repeatedly claimed he couldn't recall key details. By the end, he was a mumbling, incoherent wreck. My mother was next. She came in full of righteous fury, attempting to stare Liam down. She tried to perform, to play the victim. But under the cold, relentless pressure of Liam's questioning, her story began to unravel. He asked her about the fraudulent cancellation of the wedding venue. Her lawyer immediately objected, but Liam calmly explained it went to a pattern of behavior regarding financial deception. The judge would allow it. My mother's face paled. She refused to answer, invoking her right against self-incrimination, which on a video deposition looked exactly as guilty as it sounded. But the true highlight was Leo. He swaggered in, full of unearned confidence. He was going to be the hero who saved his family. Liam let him talk, let him spin his tale of my supposed jealousy and lifelong vendetta against him. Then, Liam changed tactics. "Mr. Vance," he said coolly, "could you please state for the record your occupation for the past 5 years?" Leo floundered. "I've been a consultant, a strategist, an artist." "Do you have any tax records, invoices, or pay stubs to substantiate any of those claims?" Liam asked. "I was often paid in cash," Leo mumbled. "I see," Liam said, making a note. "Now, I have here bank statements provided by your parents, showing over 200 separate transfers from their account to yours during that 5-year period, totaling approximately $150,000. Can you explain the nature of these payments?" Leo turned beet red. "They were gifts, family support. So you weren't financially independent." In fact," Liam continued, leaning forward, "you were entirely dependent on your parents, who were in turn significantly subsidized by your sister, Alara, correct? The very sister you are now suing for the house she was paying the taxes and insurance on so that you could live there rent-free while you pursued your art?" Leo didn't answer. He just stared at the conference table, his golden boy facade cracking into 1,000 pieces under the harsh fluorescent lights. The depositions were a bloodbath. When we watched the videos later, it was clear their case was not just weak, it was non-existent. Their lawyer knew it. After seeing the footage, he strongly advised them to drop the suit. But my mother, in her pride and her hatred, refused. And so, we headed towards a court date. They were forcing my hand, pushing me into a final public confrontation I had never wanted, but was now fully prepared to win. They still believed they could bully me into submission. They had learned nothing. The weeks leading up to the court date were a strange sort of limbo. Life went on. I had deadlines at work. Liam had other cases. We had dinner with friends. But everything was underscored by a low humming tension. The lawsuit felt like a final exam for which I had been studying my entire life. I was prepared. I had the facts on my side. But the anxiety of the performance, the public spectacle of it all, was inescapable. Their lawyer, a slick reptilian man named Marcus Thorne, made one last attempt to avoid the courtroom. He called Liam with a settlement offer. It was audacious in its delusion. They would drop the lawsuit in exchange for a one-time payment of $250,000 and a signed agreement that I would contribute a monthly stipend of no less than $3,000 for the ongoing care and support of my elderly parents. Liam had put the call on speakerphone for me to hear. I listened to Thorne's oily voice lay out the terms, and I didn't feel anger. I felt a profound, weary sadness. Even now, after everything, they still saw me as nothing more than a living trust fund they were entitled to. "Marcus," Liam said, his voice dangerously calm when Thorne had finished, "I want you to listen very carefully. Not only are we rejecting your laughable offer, but we are also filing a motion for sanctions against you and your clients for filing a frivolous lawsuit. We will be seeking to have them pay for the entirety of our legal fees. We will see you in court." He hung up the phone without waiting for a reply. The day of the hearing arrived. It wasn't a full jury trial, but a summary judgment hearing, where a judge would hear the arguments and decide if there was enough merit to the case to proceed. Liam was confident the judge would dismiss it outright. The courtroom was a sterile, intimidating space of dark wood and high ceilings. I sat beside Liam at the plaintiff's table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. A few rows behind us sat my former family. I could feel their eyes on my back, a collective stare of resentment. I did not turn around. When the judge entered, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Mariana Sandoval, a hush fell over the room. She reviewed the case file, her expression unreadable. She then allowed Marcus Thorne to make his opening statement. He was a performer. He painted a picture of my parents as simple, trusting souls, financially unsophisticated, who had been ruthlessly taken advantage of by their cunning, heartless daughter in their moment of greatest weakness. He spoke of family bonds and moral duties. He portrayed Leo as a devoted son, fighting for his parents' honor. It was a compelling work of fiction. Then it was Liam's turn. Liam did not perform. He stated facts. He walked the judge through the timeline with methodical precision, presenting a mountain of evidence. He showed her the deed, the lease, the cashed rent checks. He presented the email from my father admitting the house was lost before I got involved. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't use inflammatory language. He simply built a case so solid, so irrefutable, that it made Thorne's dramatic narrative seem like a cheap paperback novel. The final brutal blow came when Liam moved to play excerpts from the video depositions. He started with my father, showing the judge the clip where he repeatedly contradicted himself about the timeline of the foreclosure, finally mumbling, "I can't recall," his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Next, he played the clip of my mother. He showed her smugly entering the room, and then he showed the moment he asked her about the fraudulent wedding cancellation. The entire courtroom watched as she paled. Her lawyer jumped to his feet, and she invoked her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. The judge's pen, which had been moving steadily, stopped. Her eyes narrowed on my mother. Finally, he played the highlight reel from Leo's deposition. The courtroom saw him swagger, then falter. They heard Liam calmly dissect his financial dependence, ending with the devastating question about his sister subsidizing his life. They watched as Leo sat in stunned, defeated silence, utterly exposed. When the videos finished, the courtroom was silent. Marcus Thorne looked ashen. My parents and Leo seemed to have shrunk into their seats. Judge Sandoval looked down from her bench, her gaze sweeping over my family. There was no sympathy in her eyes. There was only a cold, professional disdain. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice sharp and clear, "in my 15 years on this bench, I have rarely seen a lawsuit so completely devoid of merit. This is not a case of fiduciary misconduct. This is a case of familial extortion. It is a blatant and malicious attempt to harass a private citizen for financial gain. It is an abuse of the legal system, and it is an embarrassment to this court." She turned her gaze to me, and for the first time, her expression softened slightly. "Ms. Vance, it is clear to this court that you have been the victim here, not the perpetrator. Not only did you save your family from a foreclosure brought on by their own irresponsibility, but you supported them for 5 years in a property you legally owned. Their response was to attempt to defraud you, and when that failed, to drag you through this baseless and painful ordeal." She looked back at Thorne and my family. "Therefore, I am granting the defendant's motion for summary judgment. This case is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it can never be brought before this or any other court again." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. I squeezed Liam's hand, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore," she continued, her voice like steel, "I am granting the defendant's motion for sanctions. Your clients, Mr. Thorne, will be responsible for paying all of Ms. Vance's legal fees associated with this case. And as for you, I am referring this matter to the State Bar Association for a review of your conduct in knowingly filing a frivolous and vexatious lawsuit. This court does not take kindly to its resources being wasted by playground bullies hiding behind law degrees." She banged her gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. "This court is adjourned." It was over. We had not just won. We had achieved total victory. As we packed our briefcases, I finally allowed myself to look at them. My father was staring into space, a broken man. My mother was weeping, not tears of sorrow, but of sheer, impotent rage. Leo was staring at me, and in his eyes, I saw something I had never seen before. Not anger, not entitlement, but a flicker of genuine fear. He had finally encountered a boundary he could not cross, a consequence he could not escape. Marcus Thorne was frantically trying to speak to them, but they ignored him. As the bailiff began to clear the room, my mother stood up and took a step towards me, her face contorted. "You!" she hissed, her voice trembling. "You did this!" Before she could say another word, Liam stepped in front of me, a calm and immovable barrier. "It's over, Susan," he said, his voice low but firm. "Go home." She looked from his resolute face to mine, and something in her seemed to finally break. The fight was gone. She turned and without another word, walked out of the courtroom, my father and Leo trailing behind her like ghosts in her wake. As Liam and I walked out into the bright afternoon sun, I felt the last, final chain break. It wasn't just about the house or the money anymore. The legal system, a force of objective truth, had validated my reality. A judge had looked at the history of my life and declared, unequivocally, that I was not the villain. I was free. But as we would soon find out, when a toxic family system finally collapses, the fallout can be far more unpredictable than a simple court ruling. The court victory should have been the end. In a normal world, it would have been the final, decisive severing. But the world my family inhabited wasn't normal. It was a closed ecosystem of delusion and blame, and the court's judgment was a foreign body it couldn't process. They had lost the house, lost the lawsuit, and were now saddled with a court order to pay our substantial legal fees, a debt they had no possible way of honoring. They had, by every conceivable metric, lost. And their complete and utter defeat broke them in ways I could never have anticipated. My father was the first to fall. A few weeks after the hearing, he suffered a mild heart attack. The doctor said it was stress-related. He recovered, but the incident seemed to extinguish the last spark of his spirit. My cousin reported that he rarely left the apartment now, a ghost haunting the cramped rooms, his ride-sharing days over for good. The financial pressure, which he had always deflected onto me, had finally landed squarely on his own shoulders, and he had crumbled beneath the weight. Leo, stripped of his golden boy status and facing the harsh reality of manual labor and mounting debt, spiraled. He started drinking heavily. He lost the warehouse job after a heated argument with a supervisor. He was arrested for a DUI, a petty, pathetic crime that landed him with a suspended license and a court-mandated treatment program. The prince had become a jester in a tragedy of his own making. And then there was my mother. Her silence was the most unsettling part of the aftermath. After the courtroom, she had retreated into a shell of cold, impenetrable fury. She was the one who refused to declare bankruptcy to discharge the legal debt, seeing it as a final, bitter act of defiance. They could garnish their meager wages for the rest of their lives. She would not give me the satisfaction of a formal surrender. About a year after the court case, as Liam and I were celebrating our second wedding anniversary, the final piece of the family drama unfolded. It came in the form of a call from my cousin, her voice strained with a mixture of pity and exasperation. "Elara, I don't know if I should be telling you this," she began. "But you need to know. Your mom, she's sick. Really sick." My mother had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of lung cancer. Years of smoking, a habit she'd picked up in her youth and never managed to quit, had finally caught up with her. The prognosis was grim. A complicated storm of emotions swirled inside me. There was no love left for the woman who had caused me so much pain, but there was a deep, vestigial echo of the daughter I used to be. There was a profound sadness for the mother she could have been. "Is she in treatment?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. "That's the thing," my cousin said, her voice dropping. "She's refusing it. She says she has no money, no insurance to cover it. She's just given up. Your dad and Leo are a mess. They don't know what to do. They can't handle it." Of course, they couldn't. They had never had to. I hung up the phone and told Liam. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "What do you want to do?" he asked when I finished. It wasn't a leading question. He was simply giving me the space to find my own answer, a gift I had never been given before. Did I want to see her? Did I want to help? The old Alara, the ghost, would have been out the door in a second, wallet open, ready to fix everything. She would have paid for the best doctors, managed the appointments, held her mother's hand, and absorbed her anger, believing that this final act of service might finally earn her the love she craved. But I wasn't her anymore. I thought about the years of being treated as a resource. I thought about the fraudulent email and the vicious lawsuit. I thought about the woman who had screamed that she wished I'd never been born on the day I finally stood up for myself. Helping her now wouldn't be an act of compassion. It would be an act of self-destruction. It would be an admission that their abuse had no permanent consequences, that I would always be there to clean up their messes, no matter how terribly they treated me. It would invalidate everything I had fought for. "I'm going to do nothing," I said, the words feeling both terribly cruel and completely necessary. "I'm not her daughter anymore. I'm just the landlord who evicted her and the lawyer who defeated her in court. Her health is not my responsibility. It never was." Liam nodded, his eyes full of a quiet understanding. "Okay," he said. "My mother passed away 2 months later. I didn't go to the funeral. Sending flowers felt hypocritical, so I did nothing. My absence, I was told, was the talk of the small service, the final, unforgivable act of the ungrateful daughter. I accepted the title. It was a small price to pay for my peace. Her death was the final crumbling stone that brought the whole rotten structure down. Without her driving force of will and resentment, my father and Leo were lost. My dad sold their few remaining assets and moved into a small, state-subsidized senior living apartment. And Leo finally hit rock bottom. With no one left to enable him, he called me. It was the first time we had spoken in nearly 3 years. His voice was almost unrecognizable, thin, tired, and stripped of all its former arrogance. He didn't ask for money, he didn't blame me, he just talked. He told me about the drinking, the job, the loneliness, and for the first time, he apologized. "I get it now, Ilara," he said, his voice cracking. "I get what they did to you, what we did. I was a part of it. I'm so sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, and it didn't erase a lifetime of pain. But it was real. I didn't want to offer him money or a place to stay. The Bank of Ilara was permanently closed. But I did something else. I sent him the contact information for a good therapist I knew and the number for a local AA meeting. "Help is out there, Leo," I told him, my voice kind but firm. "But you have to be the one to take it. Your life is your responsibility now." He thanked me and we hung up. I don't know if he ever made those calls. His journey was his own. By releasing him, I was finally, truly releasing myself. Years passed. Liam and I filled the house on Oakwood Lane with love, with laughter, and eventually with the sound of our own children's footsteps. We built a life of mutual respect and genuine partnership. The ghosts of the past faded completely, replaced by the vibrant, happy reality we had created together. One day, while cleaning out the attic, I came across a small, dusty box of old family photos. I sat on the floor and looked through them. A 5-year-old me beaming on a new bicycle, a 7-year-old me holding my infant brother Leo, a look of profound seriousness on my face, a family vacation to the Grand Canyon where we all looked, for a fleeting moment, happy. I felt a pang of sadness for the family in those pictures, for the potential that had been squandered, for the love that had curdled into something toxic and unrecognizable. But I didn't feel regret. I closed the box and put it away. It was a part of my history, the foundation upon which I had built my fortress. But it was not my home. My home was downstairs in the bright sunlit kitchen where my husband was laughing with our daughter. And I no longer a ghost, but the architect of my own life, went down to join them.